Hi, it's Jeff Merrill from the Bay Area Z-Scale, known as the BAZ Boyz, here with fellow railroaders Robert Ray and Matt Petak. We're going to show you around our modules as we introduce you to Z-Scale model railroading.
This is a small yard built up attached to the modules. It helps us show off some of the representative rolling stock that's available in Z-Scale. You can see a lot of the modern technology like the auto racks and the container stacks, along with the locomotives from various manufacturers. The primary rolling stock is from Microtrains up in Oregon, and they've been making a lot of Z-Scale rolling stock for the last 20 years. And now we have American Z lines adding to that with more modern rolling stock also. You can see here two trains running along our modular layout, and in the background we have a engine yard that was built up to kind of simulate some of the modern things you see in the world. Rolling in front of you there is a freight train from Robert Ray with all the weathering and common looking graffiti you see on it. And Matt Petak is running a freight train in the going in the southerly direction here today. Most of the trains we run are about 50 car trains, and we can easily run 75 to 100 cars. On Z-Scale, we don't have a lot of rolling stock or building structures and that available to us, so we have to scratch build many of this stuff. In this particular example, we have a building with shingles that are cut from one piece of paper, and then they're just simply layered on in each row. The window frames, all the other stuff are laser cut out of different materials to be put in place. We lay common track from manufacturers from Microtrains and Pico and old Markland track also. In this car, I put normally some perspective shots. There is a person from Prizer or Meriton or the People companies that make these small figures, and it kind of gives everybody an example of how a 6-foot person would actually look in the real scale world. We also use 3D printing. This building was made with a 3D printer, as were the small trailer and vans in there. Some things are simple castings made from rocks. Other things are laser cut, as we did in the other example, just simple scrap pieces. Again, most of the stuff in model railroading, even in larger scales, is called scratch built, made from parts, pieces, and stuff that's not from a kit, or maybe some little pieces of some kit connected with another kit. The water is made from basically a matte medium stuff, either called gel matte or Mod Podge. And you see the small figures, and we have, this is just simple green matte cloth, and we just dry brush the tops to make it look like it has the reeds that you see in the modern world. The rocks are made out of plaster castings. There's also some other principles you can use for that. In the molds, there's spray-on coating and makes a simple shell that's very lightweight, and you can heat it up with a hair gun and bend it in different directions. We have a radio tower here. It's built out of a laser cut kit, and I ran some fiber optics inside of that stuff to allow it to have a light on the top for a typical beacon, and hidden along the tower we will show you that there's actually lights, red lights for the typical tower lights you see. On the radio station is an electroluminescent panel, and it's custom made, so it has the equivalence of a typical sign. And of course, radio stations in the West Coast have a K in front of them. So what else? KBAZ, the BAZ Boyz. Here we have some of the cast rocks, and we have some of the Prizer or Meriton figures combined. And some of these are also custom painted by a company called Traufufuchs in Germany, and she paints the bare naked figures that are all put in one sprue coming out of the castings, and she custom paints them for themes like musicians or sports players and things that we would normally not get in a typical set of 5 figures from Prizer or Meriton. They would make maybe a beach bathers or hikers or something, and then you have to pick and choose, and many times you need a lot of those single figures, and it makes it very difficult to spend a lot of money to get 2 or 3 figures out of them. This is a simple polyfiber find to allow it to hang down in a natural way. And the cars are all custom made from various suppliers on eBay. Everybody has an idea about how to make something, and sometimes it's really good, and sometimes it's okay in our scale. It's very hard to get all the details nice and clean into such a small scale. In a camping scene, I have little pieces of wood split up to make similar of a campfire. There is a fiber optic light underneath the fire, so in the darkened light you can see the red and yellow embers and a little bit of a flash of yellow to simulate a fire. Here we have a tunnel, and tunnels are a problem with model railroading because eventually, sooner or later, some of the rolling stock or locomotives will derail. So you normally have to need easy access to that stuff. So we actually have a much larger hole than necessary for the tunnel, and we simply use a little stick-on magnets that come from your little real estate agent's handy handout flyers in the mailbox. And put a magnet on each side, simply put it in place, voila. The stockyard here is a kit from Robert Ray, and these are 3D printed vehicles. The cows and figures are again Preiser or Meriton typically, and put in place to kind of simulate some scene that you would use in a real world. It's available as a single stall or the triple stall. It hasn't been produced for a while, but everything's still available somewhere. In Z-Scale, the motto is, if you see it, buy it, because it won't be there tomorrow. This is an engine yard similarity. You have some ramps for servicing the locomotives. Just move that out of the way for you. You can easily see. You have a sanding tower and a water tower for the steam era stuff. But unfortunately, steam era has been a relic, so it sits in the back. That is a brass locomotive, a Challenger from UP. It has sound in it. And yes, we do have sound in Z-Scale, even as small as it is. Of course, it sounds like your cell phone when you sit it down on top of a table. It's just not quite the real thing. Many different locomotives are represented here. This is pretty famous for some of you Z-Scalers. As you might see it, it's the advert for Z-Track magazine, which focuses on just our Z-Scale model railroading. This locomotive, I've put a couple figures on the front of it and the back of it to help show the perspective again for Z-Scale model railroading. The engine yard is all laser cut materials, microtrain structures, Robert Ray's custom-made version for me, a removable roof. What I have inside is I weathered all the inside of this in the hopes of eventually, that was about 10 years ago, building all the framework and the lighting and putting all the tools and details you would normally see inside of a typical engine house. At train shows, we like to have modules that cover a larger area and spread a lot of our scenes out. But you don't have to have a large module to enjoy model railroading. In many cases, people have nothing more than a home layout built on a fixed piece of door skin or even a small piece of foam. In this module here, this is only 2 by 2 feet. Our modular standard is a 2-foot interface with 9 and 10-inch centers on the track that goes on. Otherwise, you can make any shape or size module you want. This is a Robert Ray module. This is a first place winner in national train shows. It's a lot of custom built laser kits along with some commercial kits. The church and another building here are etched brass from Miller Engineering, as are some of the vehicles and cars from some commercial suppliers. The trees are made out of basically furnace filter material with a toothpick. Ground foam is sprinkled over it after a spray adhesive is put on to make it look more like a pine tree. Some of the trees are commercial trees from JTT, owned by MRC. Some sand is used for the scene around the beach and the palm trees. The palm trees are from a company in Asia that supplies architectural models, and they make them all the way down to almost 1/10 of the size of the ones you see here. And they're just beautiful, but they do cost $10 to $15 each for these beautiful looking trees. And they have almost every type of palm tree available. This is another module from Robert Ray, one of his first modules. This has a trestle on this side and a completely different scene on the other side. Using something like a mountain or a physical divider, like a piece of plywood, you can end up creating 2 scenes on one side or the other of the module rather than a whole scene in its continuity across the entire module. The trestle's all scratch built, again using a laser cutter to make all the shapes and stuff that go along with it. There's a lot of small scene details in here, like called Easter eggs. There's an alligator chewing up somebody here, there's a deer, there's a bear, and all the other details you would find in natural scenery. The trees are made in two types on this one. There are the same furnace filter type trees, and then there are trees made by Lauren Schneider that are made out of twisted wire and sisal that is put in, and then it's spun and it makes the shape of the small thin-like details and look a little more like a tree than the furnace filter style ones. Another Robert Ray module, another first place winner. This is all entirely laser cut, whether it's the building and structure, the wharf and the dock, the signs, or the boat in the water. Once again, imagination, you find a scene or something you might think about, maybe that might be Cannery Row in Monterey. The concepts are all you need generally to get stuff started. Some of the details and stuff are even as small as steering wheel from a boat. There's even fish bones in the water. It looks like the antenna fell off that house. There's netting along the wharf. Lots of little objects and stuff strewn around throughout the entirety. As we follow down into the lumber mill section, we have two custom handmade bridge and trestles. These use a magnet to lift off and hold them in place, but allow easy track cleaning. All of this I-beam structure, all this structure is made out of simple flat laser cut material and assembled into the shapes that you see using a lock and key type of thing with a small little guide. And there are two different style bridges, of course, for two different eras and purposes.
Hi, I'm Robert Ray. What I got here is, this is a sawmill module. Built it for the National Train Show in Sacramento a few years ago. And basically what I wanted to do was have an old style sawmill and a new style sawmill on the same module. So I put a center partition in, and I built all the old style stuff. Everything's scratch built, including the cars on this thing, with the exception of the microtrains cars, all out of laser board and wood. It's got a waterfront scene. All the details are laser engraved using a raster method, and then peel and stick construction to put together these little structures. It makes putting the windows and all those details on real easy. The track work is microtrains track, scratch-built bridge out of laser board, which is a cellulose fiber with polyester impregnation in it, so it's plasticized paper. And it did take first place at the NTS, so I'm happy about that. The sawmill has a full interior, and you could see the carriage where first the logs come in and the carriage moves and it gets cut by a bandsaw. From there it goes onto a table that slices into individual boards, and then they have rotators on it to flip it over, and then the boards get shoved through and they fall down to the next floor where they're sorted and stacked, and from there they go onto the rail cars. All the sawdust and bark and everything gets chipped and conveyed into a slash burner, which burns away the material. Normally they'll use steam generated from this to run everything. This one's an electric powered sawmill, but I could add a boiler room and make it steam powered if I wanted to. It's Robert Ray again. This module here is drive-in theater. This is the Orbit drive-in. It was made to try and attract a first place award at the 2008 NTS in Anaheim, and successful. I pulled it off. They really like Z-Scale there, but this drive-in theater, it uses a digital media player and a car headrest monitor to make the screen. I just used a HO marquee and then countersunk it to make the billboard. There's individual speakers on wires in here if you look in, and then there's the lighted centerway. Snack bar's got a full interior. Outside we've got the obligatory trailer park with people sneaking a free peek of the movies. got a fireworks stand over here, and over on this side we have a drive-in dairy type of fast food restaurant, and it was a fun model, just a turnaround module, end module for Z-bend track.
This is again Robert Ray's module. This is the opposite side from the lumber mill and wharf scene that you saw earlier. This one has a wood chip sawdust. This comes out of the plant, comes into here and goes into the cars. They're filled up and taken away, and then other people would use that from everything from making chipboard or masonite, or used for fuel material like in Presto logs. The tubing on the top is made out of straws, and that's all made out of laser cut material for the rest of the part. This represents Scotia up in Northern California. It's highly compressed, as is most everything that's modeled in a model railroad layout. There's no possible way that you could ever put the actual sizes of most things. This would take almost 10 feet even in Z scale. In the back we have all the typical output product. Comes in the stacks, wrapped up in protective material. These center beam cars are custom made with the laser board, as Robert talked about earlier. Each of these cars is different. He made about 27 different models to be representing every possible style of the center beam cars. You see forklifts for hauling stuff around, vehicles, building structures, trees, as you saw before. Lighting is from China suppliers you see on eBay. Up front is another wharf scene, some sunbathers, surfboards. Again, another award-winning module from Robert Ray. This is Robert Ray's first module. He started to build these grain elevators for sale, and also build another module. The track work inside is called a time saver. It represents John Allen's famous time switching puzzle that's used at most train shows. It's a specific design of dimensions, and you need to move certain cars from one location to another using a single locomotive in a set period of time. So these are all, again, laser cut materials, except for the cylinders used for the grain things. Those are available from N-Arch, the N-Scale architect. The station in the front, again, is laser cut, giving a little small passenger stop out in the wilderness. Trees and the other shrub work and stuff is all similar to the other modules you've seen before, made out of either furnace filter material covered with ground foam of various colors, or twisted wire with a sisal rope. In front of the grain mills, you have the hopper cars in there. There are two different types of those. There's a cylindrical hopper style and a normal hopper style covered air slide hopper. You see the weathering on these things. These are all done. These do not come this way from the manufacturers, as do most cars. The trains running in front of you don't have the weathering applied to them. And this is one thing we need to do in the model train world, is we have to add some of this extra weathering like this car has here to make it look like it's actually been exposed to the environments rather than out of the factory new shine that's on there. Another weathered car makes a big difference in what we see in real life. This is Jeff Merrill's module. It is a larger end module. As you saw before, there was a small compact 2x2 module, which has smaller radius. This is okay for some shows, small setups or home layouts, but when we run at shows, we want something more realistic. The larger the curve, it makes it easier for us to pull longer trains. So this has a little more realistic radius in the ends. I had a concept to try to make some passing tracks, but also have some place to store trains while we exchange around. Somebody comes on, somebody goes to the bathroom, whatever. We need some place to sometimes park a train. I made a couple different types of turnouts on here to allow us to have interchanges also between tracks. So all of the track work on this module uses Microtrain's Flex Track and some custom hand-laid turnouts by Peter Wright that are no longer available. What we have here is the Autorack site where I took a lot of these massively dumped supply of eBay cars that we just needed to do something with. So I built this Autorack facility here using Robert Ray's laser cut structure to help me custom for that shape and size. And we have cars that are been weathered by Hien Wen to get the more realistic look of something that's really out there in the world. I have about 34 auto racks, but you can only take care of so many of them, and you can weather up in a way. The fencing is from Micron Art. The whole entire parking lot area here with all this line and striping on it was printed by Don Fedger using a commercial printer. You just simply draw stuff up and print whatever you want. Otherwise, it would take us forever to try to make perfect white stripes and other things. The tank farm in the background is a standard Keebri kit, and the junkyard is components from various suppliers like Lionel, who made a lot of little detail stuff in the past for us. The roads and strips and stuff on the other side are printed out of styrene, and so I didn't have to try to paint on or use plaster and other ways that other people do stuff. It's just so much easier to use something that's flat and spray can paint it and then run a stripe line down outside and then put it in place and build everything around you. So all of our model trains are run by digital command control. So every one of the locomotives has a microchip built into it. The boards come from Digitrax or train control systems. They're known as TCS. The nice thing about DCC is there's constant power on the track, which means lights in locomotives, passenger cars and such can stay on at all times instead of having a variable brightness like you would have with the old DC controls functions. We use NCE for our control system. It's similar to other products on the market from Digitrax, Lentz, MRC, etc. Costs about the same amount as the other ones, but they also have a little simple standalone starter package called a power cab. It has a 2 amp supply built into it, and so you can run all your trains from just a simple handheld control like this and enjoy running your trains without having to spend a lot of money to get started. Thanks for joining us to learn more about our Z-Scale model railroading with the San Francisco Bay Area Z-Scale Modular Group, also known as the BAZ Boyz. I'm Jeff, and with Matt and Rob with us today. Come see us again at any one of the train shows locally or possibly at a national shows coming soon.